And welcome to the Dionysian Chronicles, episode 1. Lorenzo Dominguez, your host, along with my friend, co-host, Joseph Topson. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. How you doing, Lorenzo?
I'm pretty good, man. So wanted to take this first episode to take time to explain what it is that we're going to be talking about throughout the series, and also kind of future events and whatnot. But so far, pretty much going to be discussing a lot of different philosophical concepts that I've been able to kind of recognize in the previous past months, and also which led to me to conduct certain experimental sessions with participants, including my co-host here. I guess I'll start by talking about kind of the title a bit, so the Dionysian Chronicles is pretty much in reference to the Greek god Dionysus. Most people mainly know him as the Greek god of wine and vegetation, but he is also the Greek god of ecstasy and madness. And in taking that as inspiration for a lot of the concepts of what we're trying to do here, which is trying to achieve what I would consider the highest level of focus and achieving pretty much an ability to have a feeling of invincibility and the feeling of power within oneself. That came to be the inspiration for pretty much a lot of what I've been able to talk about with other people and for the show. I guess the first thing we'll kind of discuss is just kind of some of the processes in which a person goes through to achieve that, and be able to kind of break down, because there are certain moments where I came across it, and certain times I kind of distrusted myself because it seemed way too simple.
Yeah.
That's kind of the funny thing. I would imagine a lot of if certain religious figures or people back in history were real and actually came to the same sort of thoughts, they probably had the same ideas themselves, or just like, is that really it? Like I could imagine that happening, for a lot of people. And so I guess we'll start breaking down some of the aspects. So when we talk about power, this will be kind of the central one of the central themes for the show. It's more so a feeling of power that can be applied to really anything. We may get political, but for the most part, my focus is on the individual's development, self-development, and it also will tie into how various religious institutions and various mythologies tended to come to some of the same feelings themselves in attempting to provide people a way to overcome obstacles and so forth. So when we initially start, we figure that power can be applied to pretty much anything. That could mean sports, that can mean music, that could mean art. It could be boxing, it could be martial arts, it could really be anything. But it's something that can be applicable to anything, in which you're in your initial stages, you'll start to feel sensations such as anxiety, nervousness, or fear. And it is once you learn to control and get past those sensations, then you start tapping into the secondary sensations, which are pretty much falling, but are not limited to things like varying degrees of euphoria, bodily lightness, heightened focus, and heightened reflexes. As soon as you tap into that. The only other goal from there is to see how deep those sensations really go. Because pretty much all of that is going to enable you to adopt a mentality that says, I can conquer the world, I am the greatest passion, I am the ultimate good, and things of that nature. And once you adopt that, things seem to be very effortless in many accounts. For martial arts, many people call it flow state, in which the fighter or martial artist will seem to land every shot perfectly, or will seem to be able to dodge everything with absolute ease. And you can also see this in music, where musicians go on stage in front of an audience, and no matter what they play, it seems to be the right note.
Yeah.
You know. So I guess now one of the things that I've been able to kind of touch upon is I've been able to kind of form an sort of experimental session with people. My co-host has participated in this session as well. I've had a couple of people as well participate with this, and so I've been able to develop this as one way to kind of see to what extent those sensations can be cultivated, and to what extent those sensations can be developed in order for the person to be able to tap into that. Because ultimately, we are also talking about a method of being able to confront tragedy, being able to confront sort of the worst case scenarios in people's lives. And so a lot of that tends to be talked about here. And as I've said, we will most likely also touch upon different aspects of different religions, be them Eastern or Western. We'll touch upon certain aspects of different cultures and so forth. Because ultimately, I do believe that a lot of the various institutions that we look at, they are all pretty much striving for the same feeling. The issue, though, is that they all have different terms and different names for it. And some traditions don't even have a name for what we're talking about. They just leave it nameless. But it is ultimately the same feeling and the same level of focus, the same level of dedication toward that. And so I guess we'll be pretty much discussing those aspects. I guess if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think you covered it like pretty thoroughly. I mean, we're going to be probably touching on multiple different like aspects of like mysticism, philosophy, meditation, how they correlate with religion. I mean, when I talked to Lorenzo previously about this, he said that our focus isn't necessarily going to be on like the overly like religious interpretation of the various states of like focus that we can like reach and attain through whichever like medium's chosen.
Mm-hmm.
It's more so to come to the consensus point of when it's indivisible, when like all of them reach the same pinnacle like state, because like throughout life we're told that like many roads lead down to the same like journey, and I mean the destination is just wherever it like takes you.
Yeah, that's definitely very true. You know, and so as we both are discussing, I mean, I think we come to a lot of different ideas about this as well. I mean, because I think the thing about this is that it's also very personal. I think for a lot of people, I think there's a lot of different variables, and then some topics, it's almost similar to psychology in the sense that it's more art than science in that sense. And so I guess for our podcast, we'll be more focused on those aspects, you know.
Yeah.
And so I guess to start off, so far, we can kind of talk about various things that aspects of religion. We'll kind of touch upon that now. I think because I would say from personal experience, the immediate sort of religion that I come across is Christianity. And my family is for the most part Catholic, and of course I myself am not somebody who adheres to really any religion in particular. I don't even necessarily know if I want to even profess belief in a God, but for the most part I do. Because for the most part, I do think that the feeling of power tends to sound a lot like what the various monotheistic religions consider God. I think those are very similar. I mean, now the obvious thing that they all share in common is that God is a father figure, sort of archetypal character who is always watching out for you and so forth. But the way that it really ties into what I've thought about it as far as how it correlates to that particular feeling, I've come to kind of think of it in under these certain terms, where in considering historically what people had to go through during in the ancient world, I imagine, and this is all speculation. I mean, but I speculate that somebody pretty much encountered those particular feelings. Somebody down the line was able to encounter them, feel the highest level of focus, and then had to try and describe that for everybody around him, and try and put that into terms that the major population would be able to understand. Because these sort of feelings you would normally associate to a conqueror like Alexander the Great or a Julius Caesar, somebody who can see the battlefield and know that they've won pretty much, and is able to play chess in that way with the battlefield. And so I guess for the monotheistic religions, going all the way back to Zarathustra and forward, you have that moment where the person most likely does believe that a deity is behind that feeling, but also has to put it in terms to where that deity is always with those people in order to give them the confidence to overcome obstacles, which is why every sort of discussion about it comes to terms of, as long as you believe, you will overcome.
Yeah.
And so that sort of central idea of of a deity being always there with you to help you overcome every obstacle, to overcome every feat, to the point where he gives you the power to scream at the walls and destroy them, and that's sort of the sensation, which also to me accounts for like how violent and how loving God is within that spectrum. I mean, it's so vast, but I think that's because the feeling of power works the same way, or at least that feeling tends to work the same way. It can be terrifying a lot of times, especially if the person doesn't know how to control fear and is unable to get past it. But it can also be the most wonderful experience ever. I mean, it's truly remarkable, I think, as far as at least as far as I've been able to encounter it, I guess start and have you kind of explain sort of your religious background.
Oh well, yeah,
Um,
I'm Jewish. I come from a very Jewish upbringing. I mean, we did all the holidays, and I went to yeshiva, which is a Jewish private school, for a number of years. And
mm,
so the thing about how the like Judaism approaches many of these like topics of like meditation and like reaching out to a higher power of obtaining through yourself is we see it more of like divine inspiration that like we believe that everyone has something called a near tamid and a neshama, which are basically like the eternal light that's granted to us as people. That's supposed to be like the spark from like God, and like
mm,
from my perspective, the way that I perceive like this heightened state of like focus is to be attuned to like the divine and to
mm,
like be fully within like the embrace of whichever divine being that you follow. I mean, for me, cognitively think I don't believe that I'd be able to obtain or comprehend and the infinitesimal like limit of power that's attributed to like a god. That's
right,
like
right, definitely. Yeah.
it's kind of hard for me to like grasp the limit of like power. Like how far can we push like our own personal like power before it becomes just blatant hubris? Because I mean,
Mm,
at a certain point, I find like through eating, through studying history, that like people oftentimes who obtain great power usually become consumed by it, and
yeah.
like it doesn't become a force driving them, but it becomes them driving the force.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah, it's a very fine line. I feel that's like connects those two. Back on to touch what you were mentioning earlier about the speculation about like the older world, where like people would like feel empowered by things and like create like the concept of like theology around it.
Mm,
I feel like back in the polytheistic times, that might explain like why there are so many embodiments of like natural elements, because like let's say someone's like lost at sea, and then they get splashed in the face by a wave, and for some reason that like puts them into like a super focused like state, and so they
yeah.
start like proselytizing about like some sort of like aquatic like life giver or something, or
Mm,
whether it's like the I can't think of any off the top of my head, to be honest. I was gonna say Norse, but generally their aquatic entities are not necessarily of the benevolent nature, so that wouldn't be a good thing.
yeah.
But, um, so also in my belief, there's different levels of like meditation. We follow there's something called spheros, which are on the tree of life, which are these circles that if you look up the sacred geometry, a lot of people are very familiar with it, but each of them have individual names, and starting with the very bottom one is supposed to be the first level of meditation, which is like the material plane, all the like material like connections you have to things. And then the next level up, it branches into two different like sections, where one of them is like the sentimental, the other is like the emotional connection to it.
Mm,
And then the next step up from that is like the beauty behind it, the engagement of life behind it, and at that point we start to ascend from the material into the ethereal. I think it is. It might be ethereal. I'm not very like too familiar with the specifics of the term.
right.
And then from that, there's this third shadow like level of meditation, which is generally surrounded behind the most mysticism in my like beliefs, which is the knowledge behind like what you are doing, because it's neither good nor bad. So the reason why it's usually obscured in most diagrams of like the tree of life is because it's not necessarily a good thing. Think of it like in the Bible, where people are talking about the tree of knowledge, good and evil. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
that like specific segment is supposed to like summarize is knowledge, good and evil.
Hmm.
And then let's skip a few steps. Eventually, you get to the top, which is like Keter, which is supposed to be like the head. That's where you're at like the tip top peak of like cognition. You are like viewing the world outside of yourself from like a collective entity, and like essentially you're united with like the being above, whatever, whoever it may be.
Hmm.
And then still it goes another step forward, and from that step forward there's like nothing, and that's supposed to be the pinnacle point of like meditation, where like nobody can like surpass. And then they still go another level beyond that, which is basically the like complete abyss nothing, where like absolutely like nothing can exist, not even like a thought. And that's supposed to be like the surrounding pre-existential goop, I guess, that was
Oh.
like predates the story of the creation and the like cosmology of like at least my faith. And I mean, a lot of Abrahamic religions have certain hints towards like that, but yeah, it's really interesting to try to like and visualize where you go once you already hit like the absolute nothing, and you just realize that there's even more like steps to go, which to me seems like enlightenment isn't something that you just obtain and stop, because there's always
Oh,
like
yeah.
a next stage and a next stage and a next stage.
Yeah.
So I think that it's truly limitless, but I also feel like the further you go, like the less present you are in like the now, if you know what I mean, because like you're going and you're going and you're going and you're going, but where do you stop to like experience all of this?
Yeah. That kind of that kind of really touches upon change. Really, I mean, how many changes you go through. I mean, in life, or at every turn, you're definitely not going to have the answer for everything.
Definitely not.
I mean, that, and so, because I mean, this is also the first time I've really heard Judaism broken down in depth. You know, and so it's interesting to me as well. Especially in when we talk about that particular feeling that we tend to talk about. I mean, it's very interesting to kind of tie that all in, and so I guess from there, because I do acknowledge like there are certain at least certain similarities uh, in I guess in the meditational sense in Buddhism to where in trying to achieve that thought of nothing pretty much, but although there are definitely a lot of different terms and a lot of different practices and whatnot, but I do think pretty much the effort and the feeling that's trying to be achieved after is pretty much the same. I mean, if we look at the absolute focus of it. Um, you know, um, uh, I guess the main thing I could touch upon with even Christianity, though, because I mean, um, I guess I never really felt too akin to that. Although I kind of respect it as a religion it is, in the sense that to the degree to which they took concepts like humility to the extent that they did, in order to get people to be humble or to have people conform to that sort of mindset that they were trying to instill in people. Um, but I think to the degree, to the extent that they did, that is something I tend to disagree with as far as the humility, especially like you look at the modern world of everybody going, well, we're just a tiny speck of dust in the middle of vast nothingness. How important are we? And it's not to say that it's necessarily false. It's just like, well, where is the hope in that? Where is the degree to which you can believe in yourself? Start to really develop that in yourself, to gather some sort of strength.
I don't know if I like believe in true nihilism to that extent, because I've talked to many nihilists. I mean, this is pure anecdote, but a lot of them are still capable of like existentialism. Like, yeah, they realize that as a whole, as humanity, we're like not even a far in like the history or like effect on the universe, but like still what happens to them and what happens in their lives matter to them. But they fully realize that beyond themselves, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Which is really, really interesting, like almost like dualistic, because in one hand you're just like, I know that whatever I do is not really going to have any effect, or I don't know if any effect is the proper wording, but like such a minute like speck of effect that it's probably not going to like affect the universe.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're just like, well, I need to get my bills paid. I love my daughter. I like love my family. Like, yeah, this doesn't matter, but that's not going to like stop me, because I still want to matter.
Yeah, that's a very strange notion. It's the almost like the tightrope act where you have this other sides of the staff trying to balance each other out, and they're just walking the tightrope, and that sort of thing. And so yeah, I definitely tend to find that strange too. But the main thing though, that I think I've been able to come after is in kind of realizing these sort of concepts. I feel like there's a whole world of beauty that we can still develop, and I think that the level of beauty that we're willing to create, we also have to be willing to face the almost equally amount of absurdity or ugliness that faces it.
I mean, creation and destruction usually go hand in hand. It's very hard to create something without creating it on top of something else.
Yeah.
Or like building onto something.
And yet again, we come back to even the title of this podcast, where the pendulum that swings, the pendulum of madness, I should say, that swings between destruction and creation, is very much that same thing. It's the source of inspiration. Dionysus is the source of inspiration for either of those things to happen, and so you have a sort of disposition where you recognize the love of tragedy that comes with your ability to create, and I don't know. I found that to be really exciting to kind of talk about. Especially like we give certain concepts like trying to develop in trying to develop a life philosophy. It should be kind of almost like a Bruce Lee model, where it's a method by which you're trying to apply to your own living that is functional. I think if we look at it in that sense, in which you have martial art, where the martial just means I have to fight, and the art side can say, there is no one way of fighting. I think you come up with a much more beautiful sort of way of thinking about life in general. Because I mean, you start figuring out, looking at being able to talk about different concepts that are really that you're trying to develop within yourself, really. Yeah, I tend to think that's a more exciting aspect to look forward to, especially in seeing a future where there is much more creation. And I feel like that's the kind of future that I definitely look forward to. Not ignoring all the things that are bad, but just simply saying, there's something there. There is definitely something to be said about if only people could believe in themselves, what could they do?
Exactly, or trust each other.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Freaking And so yeah, freaking I guess to kind of touch upon even certain Buddhist ideas, because I've talked to you about this too, where it sort of it sort of clicked in me more so as this, where the problem of trying to get rid of thought and trying to empty your mind and so forth um, comes in a way um, where we recognize that in the modern world that we live in, especially, we're walking, talking DMV forms.
Yep.
We're basically people that go to the DMV, look at the form, and automatically have to know your date of birth, your current address, your current occupation, your annual income, your blood type, all your social security. You have to know all those things in order to live in society, in order to live in civilization. And so all of that requires thought. Like it requires you to constantly think and be able to recall on memory, all this information. Especially like academia, you have to recall dates, you have to recall people, you have to recall theorems that touch upon all this same stuff. But when we talk about cultivating the feeling of power or the feeling of invincibility, but to keep it simple, I guess I just call it power, just because that's kind of the closest thing that seems to relate itself to us. None of those things really matter as far as pure, genuine feeling, you know. And I've tended to think about this too, because like that's the attempt is to get away from all the thoughts that clog up everything, in order so that when you do come to the point where the thoughts are no longer there, there's nothing but your feeling at that point. There's nothing more than what you feel and how the world around you makes you feel.
Yeah.
And so as soon as that occurs, in order for that to occur, is the real difficulty, because a lot of times people get told, get rid of your thoughts, and that's pretty much impossible. I mean,
very, very difficult to do if you're not practiced or trained in doing something like that. I mean, I tried it once and it took me several hours to actually like get to that point, and like, yeah.
It's incredibly a difficult procedure in that sense. But I mean, the main people that I've heard talk about meditational stuff was either Alan Watts or Krishnamurti. Pretty much talk about the process of just simply letting go rather than doing anything. It just has a different implication where instead of having to do anything, letting go just simply means letting go. Just if I had a pen and you told me let it go, it's just release of the fingers and the pen drops. Gravity does all the work for you.
Yes, you become the pen and you just fall and 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 fall into the void.
And so pretty much whereas if you told somebody get rid of the pen, that implies I got to get up and put it in my room, or I got to get
lock
up
it in a box,
yeah,
bury it.
I mean there's so many implications, but it's funny that it's really the implications that matter in this sort of stuff, and a lot of it is very straightforward. It's very simple. There's so much to kind of explore. I mean, when you look at even the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, or at least some of the uh, what they consider like their kind of ingredients for the path of enlightenment. Um, there are things like right mindfulness or right conduct and meditation and right focus and so forth. That's pretty much how it tends to be labeled, and it seems kind of straightforward. Like even some of the teachings where like there was even a story where a man came to the Buddha and pretty much asked him, I'm very unhealthy. I'm very obese. I can't really move. Everything hurts. Can you help me? Pretty much. And the Buddha pretty much saw that he was a wealthy man and saw that he ate all the time or whatever. And he told him, "Do you eat often?" And he says, "Yeah, all the time." And he's like, "Do you sleep often?" And he's like, "Yeah, almost 15 or 16 hours a day. I tend to sleep." Buddha pretty much tells him right there, if you chase after desire, that you suffer. If you eat too much, you become obese. If you sleep too much, you become lazy. You know, and like I said, very straightforward seeming. Very almost just very simple. I mean, anybody else in today's world would have looked at that and be like, "Well, that seems kind of obvious." But the thing about it is like when you really dive into what makes a person lazy and the mentality that tends to justify it, it becomes it becomes that much more complicated. And I think that's the issue that ties into getting rid of thought is the thought of that justifies those things, and the thought that justifies the anger that you tend to feel or the sadness tends to make overcomplicate everything. And now of course you still need to think to survive, but it's more so an ability to dive deep into achieving focus and so forth. Um, and there's a discipline in that you have to develop in yourself. Um,
Yeah, a lot of disciplines teach that in order to even have a chance of obtaining and controlling that inner power, you have to condition and control your physical body first through like arduous tasks like I don't know, carrying water, chopping wood, or
yeah.
doing physical training, or like even in some instances like going through excessive amounts of physical pain depending on like the like route of like exploration, which yeah, it's pretty intense. And then there's others like the Buddhist path, which I'm not entirely familiar from, so I'm just like speculating. But from my understanding of it, anyone can like pursue a path of enlightenment. I mean, there's the famous story of the Buddha who like fasted for I'm not really sure how many days it was, but it was allegedly an extremely long period of time to like obtain his like enlightenment, or like the stories of like Moses getting the Ten Commandments from the Mount Sinai, where he supposedly fasted for 40 days straight, and like it's really interesting how it seems to reach the upper echelons or levels of like this power. Most people have to go through some sort of very arduous task. Like it's not an easy process to like cross the threshold. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it ultimately comes down to more like scientific of like pushing through your fight or flight response and then teaching your body how to control your like endorphins as they release.
Yeah.
Which like if you continually express yourself, expose yourself to like
Yeah.
the same stimuli, your body becomes conditioned by it. You learn from it. You becomes easier to go through the motions. Like if it was in martial arts, doing like stretches to get into like better posture or better technique, drill day after day after day, they'll no longer like hurt as much, and like your range of motion within them becomes like expanded based upon like how hard you push yourself and like the consistency.
Yeah, and I mean, touching upon martial arts too. I mean, in entering an art form that fully accepts that violence exists. You know, I mean, um, I think there is an appeal to me about that in developing a method within martial arts, which becomes your pursuit, I guess, or personal pursuit of learning how to focus your energy, but not wanting to pull it out, but being able to wield it whenever, you know, and fully just seeing the capacity for violence and the capacity uh, for pain as it is, you know. Um, uh, Almost to a sense where I don't know. It's almost as if the martial arts master almost in viewing people fighting almost becomes the psychoanalyst who views the patient, in which their role is not to really judge them. It's to see where their venting is. It's to see where their energy
Exactly.
is being expressed. You know.
Energy. It's funny that you like mention that, because when I was taking martial arts, I took Choi Lai Fut, which is a type of kung fu, for a number of years, and like there's this philosophical state. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily purely philosophical, but once you reach a certain level of like masterhood within certain Eastern martial arts, there is a state called, I think it's called Qi Gong or Gong Qi, which is like training the movement of energy through your body. It's kind of like similar in my knowledge to like how Tai Chi works, where it's very like slow and like fluid motions that are more so built on like moving your body energy, and like there's some really interesting like aspects of it. Like it's utilized for what's called iron body training, which is essentially the set of rapid conditioning in which can make your skin or parts of your body durable to the point of like bending rebar against your throat, or like snapping a spear the same like way, or like breaking softball bats across your shins without leaving a mark, or like hanging themselves for like hours at a time by the throat and like not like suffering ill effect from it, or hanging or doing headstands for like hours. It's pretty amazing how far the body can like go with the proper knowledge of how to like control your chi or energy or body responses, however you want to like describe it. Can like, yeah,
Definitely. Well, I think we'll pretty much end it there. You know, I think I definitely look forward to the rest of the series. And for those hoping to catch more of the series, we'll definitely be posting more on Instagram, posting more on Facebook, and you know, just check us out on YouTube.
yeah.
But thank you guys for listening in. Hope you enjoyed.